Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion for June the 2nd, 2016. Quite a bit on the plate today to talk about, so let's get right into it. Bonnie has re-intensified and is now a tropical depression again. Here it is off the North Carolina coast. The latest track map from the National Hurricane Center shows that it is centered just to the south and east of Cape Hatteras off the North Carolina Outer Banks here. And it'll move out to sea where it should degenerate once again, apparently, over the open waters of the Atlantic. This is what the visible satellite shot looks like. A few areas of deep convection here near the center, so this may in fact get upgraded again to tropical storm intensity. You can see some decent banding coming into the structure, so it's not like it is completely disorganized. And I think what it did is it took advantage of this warmer Gulf Stream water, which I'll actually show you in a minute. Let's look at the radar first. This is the center of circulation here. A few areas of very heavy rain, confined, fortunately, for the large-scale purposes, just to the North Carolina Outer Banks. So Highway 12 out there, anywhere from all the way up to Duck and Corolla, down to Hatteras, not quite to Ocracoke. I think Ocracoke Island, which lies right in here, starting to get out of the heavier rain, it looks like. But areas from Hatteras north, be careful out there. This will move away, I promise. It's been a slow mover. Remember, this came in over the weekend down near Charleston, meandered around, and then it's finally ended up here, and it should head on out to sea from there. What happened? How did it re-intensify? Well, I think that the proximity to the Gulf Stream right here, this is where the water temperatures are in the low 80s, and then the Pamlico Sound itself is also fairly warm, probably about 79, 80 degrees, and warm water is warm water. That's enough fuel for this to take advantage of the moisture and the energy in the atmosphere, and it reinvigorated because the upper level winds over this small area that it was located were just favorable enough. We'll look at that in a moment, that it was able to do something. And you can see too, there's just a wee bit of ocean heat content, upper ocean heat content. You can see that right there. I'll just draw an arrow to point to it. It's at the bottom end of the scale, but it's not like it's zero. And what does that mean? Well, there's just a little bit more energy in the water because of the warm Gulf Stream. We call that upper ocean heat content. And even though, again, it's at the bottom of the scale here, it's more than zero. And so there you have it. It was just enough ocean energy to draw from. And then the upper level winds were not too bad. This is what that looks like. And this is located right in here. This is where Bonnie is. And you can see these wind barbs, light and variable for the most part. Few knots of wind overall, 5 to 10 at the most. And even the shear map itself shows that. Fairly light 5 to 10 knot winds right through here. So it only needed a small area to take advantage of the favorable conditions, and it did so. And this is important. You might see the rest of this map and say, just like it would be obvious here, that, wow, look at all this. Very strong westerly winds, this trough here, strong cyclonic flow out in the subtropical Atlantic. You know, westerlies are everywhere on the order of 40, 50, 60 knots, but it didn't matter in this one sweet spot right near the North Carolina coast, practically on the coast, that Bonnie was able to reinvigorate and strengthen. And this is what the vorticity signature looks like. So basically round in nature, a little bit oval shaped, but it certainly isn't, you know, globular like this, for example. It doesn't look like a blob or a glob or whatever you want to call it. It's round in its appearance, and that tells me that there's just enough energy bundling there, again, over those warmer Gulf Stream waters right here, and boom, there it is. So fascinating to me, because it shows you that a system can take advantage of its local conditions, even though the large-scale pattern elsewhere in the Atlantic is unfavorable. So let's go back to the National Hurricane Center starting point, if you will, and jump over to the eastern North Pacific, where we do have Invest Area 91E. This is the two-day plot, 60% chance for tropical cyclone formation. But let's look at the 5-day graphical outlook for this region. Pull up just the image here. And you can see, again, as I've been talking about, this is going to move away from any land areas at all. There's no curving back towards Mexico. That is not going to happen. So even if this goes on to develop, and it should, it's forecast to do so, it'll move away from land. Then we have to start looking at the Atlantic 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook map, because this is just starting to become more interesting as well. We see medium potential for development here, which is 40% right now, in the Gulf of Mexico as energy starts to pile in from the Caribbean Sea and try to consolidate around Central America. It looks like sort of a very large area of energy in the 850 millibar level all the way down to the surface. That's about 5,000 feet down to the surface, basically piling in what we call a gyre, just a large rotating area of energy over warm water that could become a tropical depression or a tropical storm over the next several days. And we can look at that in the latest GFS model run here. This is from 12Z today. Again, what we call the morning run of the model. This is the initial conditions. And I want you to notice something here. This is what the vorticity signature looks like for Bonnie in the model field. And remember, that's what it also looks like in the actual analysis here from the University of Wisconsin Cooperative Institute for Meteorological Satellite Studies, their map, analyzing the situation. So this is not a forecast. This is actually an analysis, and the model picks that up fairly well. And you can see this round appearance to the vorticity signature at the 850 millibar level of the atmosphere, about 5,000 feet up. So notice that as I talk about what tries to transpire down in this region over the next few days. So let's move through the frames, 1 3-hour segment at a time. You see out goes Bonnie finally by tomorrow. This is valid on Friday in the afternoon. And we go through Friday night into Saturday. Bonnie moves on out into the open Atlantic here, still maintaining that fairly round vorticity signature, again indicating a fairly robust system in the atmosphere. It's consolidated. Meanwhile, down here we do have this surge of energy and low-level moisture coming into the Caribbean Sea around the backside of this high-pressure area in the lower levels of the atmosphere. And finally, as time goes on, you start to see a little bit more concentrated area of energy right here heading towards the Yucatan Peninsula. And we're at 57 hours now. That's going out to day 3 at 72 hours proper. And you start to see some of these lobes of energy trying to wrap in and this large area of general counterclockwise flow over the Yucatan. And as I move through the frames heading on out to day 4, this is 96 hours out into time. Yes, we do have this counterclockwise look to the system, but remember what Bonnie looked like today up here as a round vorticity signature. This is more spread out and oblong in shape, not really bundled around one common area, so it doesn't look as healthy. So that tells me that at least again today, it doesn't look quite as strong as you would be looking for if you were trying to pinpoint, say, the development of a hurricane, for example. Not to say that it's impossible for this to happen, but it's not showing up in the GFS model anyway. I wish that we had the budget to dissect the euro, but that's probably easily a 6-figure-a-year contract with the ECMWF people that doesn't fit in our budget right now. So I'm left with the GFS, which luckily our taxpayer dollars pay for, and I can show you, peel back all these layers of the atmosphere and show you what happens with these different, the surface, 5,000 feet up and on up into the atmosphere to the outflow level. Remember, the atmosphere is made up of these different layers, and this one shows me that it's a little bit better organized than what it was showing yesterday, but still not completely bundled like we're seeing with even weak tropical depression, almost tropical storm Bonnie today. Finally, moving on through the time frame to 120 hours now here, approaching, I guess you could say, a landfall with Florida perhaps in the Northeast Gulf. Yes, by day 5 it is bundling a little bit better, and you see the overall counterclockwise flow, but it almost looks like it's kind of caught in a trough here. It just doesn't have that classic look. Energy piles in, consolidates, but it's still fairly loosely organized. And if we look at the upper levels of the atmosphere at this same time frame, the system will be located right in here, and you can see very clearly that the upper level winds are strong, 50 knots plus out of the southwest, right over the top of that thing. That is not going to support substantial tropical cyclone development. If it was sitting down here still, where the upper level winds are much lighter, on the order of 10 knots or less, then it would be more of a concern. So unless this area of anticyclonic flow or high pressure in the atmosphere expands more north to give this a better umbrella, if you will, of protection from these strong southwesterly winds that you can clearly see just as well as I can moving across the Gulf of Mexico, this won't develop too much more than sort of a lopsided, some people call it an easterly, an east side weighted system, where most of the worst weather is on the east side of the low pressure area, for example. Doesn't mean it won't be an unpleasant day or a couple of days for Florida, but it certainly doesn't have the look of a hurricane coming through, and that's obviously the top of the food chain, if you want to call it that, for what we are looking for here. So something to watch, and the increasing chances of this developing make it more interesting to watch as each day goes by, and we'll see what comes of it. But right now, it doesn't look to be a hurricane threat, and hopefully it will stay that way. And Florida's 10-year plus streak of 0 hurricanes will continue, at least for now. All right, well, that's it for me for today. A lot to cover. Hope you learned something from it. As always, these blog posts, the video blog version of this, we put on YouTube. It goes into our app, and I want to mention that real quick. If you want to catch our stuff on the go, everything is consolidated or aggregated, if you will, into one convenient app on iPhone and Android devices called Hurricane Impact. That's 2 words, Hurricane Impact, because that's basically what we talk about, is the impact of these weather systems, more than tracking tools. I want to show you that in these video discussions, and those are always published to our app instantaneously once we publish them on YouTube as well. So if you want to grab Hurricane Impact, a great way to support our work by your purchase, and then you have our information anywhere you are. You don't have to worry about looking for it on the web, so to speak. All right? So there you go, my shameless plug for what I think is a very valuable product. I like it when I do my updates and I go back and look through things. I'll go in my own app and check and make sure I said everything correctly. So anyway, enough about that. Have a good rest of your Thursday afternoon. I'm Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. Thanks as always for tuning in, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow.